The rain came down hard on New Seattle that evening. The drops hit the big dome above the city and made a sound like drums. Officer Kyle Morrison walked through the lower streets with his hand near his weapon. He liked this part of town because he felt powerful here. People looked away when he passed. They knew better than to challenge him. Kyle had been a cop for 5 years now. He learned the job from his father, who told him many things about the world. His father said some people were dangerous just by existing. His father said you had to watch certain types of people more carefully than others. His father said the old earth had fallen apart because the wrong people got too much power. Kyle believed every word his father spoke. That was when he spotted the old man walking down the wet street. The man was black and probably around 70 years old by the look of him. His hair was gray and cut short. He wore an old jacket that had seen many years of use. The man walked slowly but with his head up and his back straight. Something about that dignity made Kyle angry. He could not explain why, but it burned in his chest like acid. Kyle stepped into the middle of the sidewalk and blocked the old man's path. The rain kept falling, but Kyle did not care. He wanted to feel important, and this old man would help him feel that way. "Show me your identification card right now." Kyle's voice was hard and loud. The old man stopped walking and looked at Kyle with calm, dark eyes. Those eyes had seen many things, and they showed no fear. That made Kyle even more angry. "Is there some kind of problem, officer?" The old man's voice was steady and patient, like he was talking to a child who did not understand something simple. Kyle felt his face get hot. "I said, show me your identification right now. Do not make me ask again." His hand moved to his belt where his electric stun weapon hung in its holder. But something inside Kyle wanted more than that. He wanted to see fear in those calm eyes. He wanted this old man to know his place. The old man reached slowly into his jacket pocket. Kyle's prejudice flared up like fire in his blood. His hand went past his stun weapon and grabbed his combat knife instead. The blade came out of its case with a whisper of metal. 8 inches of sharp steel caught the light from the street lamps above. Kyle raised the knife and pointed it at the old man's chest. "Do not move another inch." Kyle shouted the words loud enough for people on the street to hear. They stopped and stared. Some pulled out their personal recording devices. I knew it. You people always have something hidden. You are always up to no good. The old man did not flinch or step back. He did not raise his hands or beg for mercy. He just kept moving his hand slowly out of his jacket pocket. Kyle's heart pounded in his chest. Part of him knew this was wrong, but that part was small and quiet. The loud part of him said this old man deserved whatever happened next. What came out of the jacket pocket was not a weapon. It was a small card made of plastic and metal. The old man held it up between 2 fingers. A hologram sprang to life above the card and filled the air with blue light. Kyle's eyes went wide as he read the information floating in front of him. Admiral Charles Bradford, United Earth Fleet, years of service 47. The list of medals and honors went on and on. The Congressional Medal of Valor, the Sol Defense Star, the Frontier Cross. More than 20 others that Kyle recognized from history books. Current status retired civilian. Kyle felt the blood drain from his face. His hand holding the knife started to shake. He had just pulled a knife on one of the most decorated military officers in human history. The crowd around them grew larger. More people pointed their recording devices at the scene. Kyle knew his life was about to change, and not in a good way. "Admiral." Kyle's voice came out weak and small. He did not know what else to say. The knife still hung in the air between them, but now it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The Admiral raised one weathered hand. "I'm just a civilian now, officer. You do not need to salute me or call me by my rank, but you do need to put that knife away before someone gets hurt." Kyle lowered the knife slowly. His face burned with shame, but also with anger. He tried to think of something to say that would make this better. "I was only doing my job, sir. You match the description of a suspect we are looking for in this area. A dangerous man who has been causing trouble." The Admiral's face did not change, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "What description would that be, officer?" "An elderly black man walking home from the Veterans Center. Is that the dangerous criminal you were looking for? This is the 3rd time this month you have stopped me on this street. Always you and always with some excuse." Kyle opened his mouth, but no words came out. The crowd pressed closer. He could hear their whispers and feel their judgment. His career was over. His life was ruined, all because of this old man who should have just shown fear like Kyle expected. But then Admiral Bradford did something Kyle never expected. He did something that would change everything that came after. The Admiral looked around at all the people with their recording devices and spoke in a voice that carried across the wet street. I will not be filing a formal complaint against this officer. Not today, and not unless he gives me reason to do so in the future. The crowd murmured in surprise and disappointment. They wanted drama and justice and punishment. Kyle stared at the Admiral in confusion. Why would this man let him go? Why would someone with so much power choose not to use it? It made no sense, sir. I do not understand. Kyle's voice shook as he spoke. You could end my career right now. You could make sure I never wear this uniform again. Why are you not doing that? Admiral Bradford stepped closer to Kyle. His eyes were hard but not cruel. Because I spent 47 years defending humanity, officer. All of humanity. Every color and every world and every type of person you can imagine. I did not fight in 3 wars and lose friends and watch ships burn so that we could bring Earth's old hatreds out here to the stars with us. The Admiral turned to look at the crowd. Go home, everyone. There is nothing more to see here. This officer and I are going to have a conversation about what it means to serve and protect. That is all. The crowd slowly broke apart. People kept their recording devices pointed at Kyle and the Admiral for a few more seconds, but then they walked away into the rain. Soon it was just the two of them standing on the wet street under the lights. Walk with me, officer. The Admiral said it like an order, not a request. Kyle knew he had no choice. He put his knife back in its case and followed the old man down the street. The rain kept falling and Kyle wondered what would happen next. They walked in silence for several minutes. Kyle kept his eyes on the ground while Admiral Bradford moved slowly but steadily down the sidewalk. The rain had stopped and steam rose from the heated pavement. Kyle's mind raced with questions, but he was too afraid to speak. Finally, the Admiral stopped in front of a memorial wall made of black stone. Do you know what I did during the Kryn incursion, officer? The Admiral's voice was soft, but it carried weight like heavy metal. Kyle shook his head. He knew about the Kryn War from school, but only the basic facts. The Kryn were an alien race that attacked human colonies 40 years ago. Earth and her colonies fought them for 10 years before finally winning. Millions died on both sides. That was all Kyle remembered from his history classes. I commanded the defense of Tau Ceti colony. Admiral Bradford ran his fingers across names carved into the stone wall. 15,000 humans against a full Kryn battle fleet. We were outgunned and outmatched in every way that mattered. Our ships were older. Our weapons were weaker. Our shields could not take the punishment their cannons delivered. By every calculation, we should have died in the first hour of fighting. Kyle listened despite himself. He had never heard this story before. The Admiral's voice painted pictures in his mind. Ships burning in space, people screaming as hulls cracked open. The cold darkness waiting to swallow them all. My crew was what some people back then called mixed. We had people from every part of Earth and every colony world. White people from Europe and America. Black people from Africa and the Caribbean. Brown people from India and the Middle East. Asian people from China and Japan and Korea. It did not matter where they came from. When those Kryn ships appeared in our sky, we did not see each other's skin color. We saw family. We saw humans who needed to survive together or die together. The Admiral paused and touched one name on the wall with particular care. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, she was my weapons officer. Korean girl from New Seoul. 23 years old and brilliant with targeting systems. She kept our guns firing even when our power systems were failing. She died when a Kryn plasma bolt cut through our bridge. The explosion killed 12 people instantly. Sarah was one of them. Kyle felt something twist in his chest, but he pushed it away. These were just words. Just stories. They did not change who he was or what he believed. The Admiral moved to another name. Commander Peter Okonkwo, Nigerian man who ran my engineering section. He kept our engines running with duct tape and prayers. When the reactor started to overload, he went into the core room himself. The radiation killed him in minutes, but he stabilized the system and saved 800 lives. His skin was so black it was almost blue, mine too. The Kryn did not care about that when they killed him. All they saw was human. More names followed. Captain Rosa Martinez from Mexico. Dr. Ahmed Hassan from Egypt. Lieutenant Ivan Petrov from Russia. Each name had a story. Each story ended in death. Kyle started to feel uncomfortable as the list went on. These people died as heroes, but his father never mentioned them. His father only talked about the failures and the mistakes and the people who let humanity down. We lost 3,000 people that day. The Admiral's voice grew rough like sandpaper on wood. 3,000 good humans who fought and died protecting 15,000 others. The Kryn did not ask about anyone's race or religion or background before they fired their weapons. Death came equally to everyone, and survival came because we worked together, not in spite of our differences but because of them. Kyle found his voice finally. With all due respect, sir, that was war. What I do is law enforcement.
The situations are completely different.
Out here in the streets, I deal with criminals and dangerous people every day. I have to make quick decisions about who poses a threat. Sometimes those decisions are based on patterns and statistics. The Admiral turned to face Kyle directly. Patterns and statistics. Is that what you call it? Tell me, officer, what pattern did I fit when you pulled your knife on me? Was it the pattern of an elderly man walking home? Or was it the pattern of someone whose skin color made you uncomfortable? Kyle's face burned red. He wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. The truth was, he did profile people. He did assume things based on how they looked. His training taught him to watch for suspicious behavior, but his father taught him that some people were suspicious just by existing. The Admiral started walking again, and Kyle followed. They passed shops that were closing for the night. People glanced at them as they walked by, but no one stopped or stared. The incident from earlier was already fading into memory for most people. But for Kyle, it felt like his whole world was cracking apart. I grew up hearing certain things. Kyle spoke quietly and slowly. My father told me stories about how Earth fell into chaos. He said it was because certain groups of people were given positions of power they did not earn. He said they got those positions because of their race, not because of their skill. He said good people died because of affirmative action and diversity quotas and political correctness. And do you believe what your father told you? The Admiral did not sound angry or judgmental. He just sounded curious, like he genuinely wanted to know the answer. Kyle thought about it. He had believed his father completely for most of his life. But standing here next to a man who commanded fleets and won wars and saved thousands of lives, standing here after pulling a knife on that man for no reason except prejudice, Kyle was not so sure anymore. I do not know what I believe anymore, sir. Kyle's voice was barely louder than a whisper. Everything I thought I knew seems wrong now. Good. The Admiral stopped at a small cafe with warm lights in the windows. Doubt is the first step toward wisdom. Come inside. I want to tell you about your father. Kyle's head snapped up. You know about my father. I know about everyone who died at Kepler Station. The Admiral pushed open the door and warm air rushed out. Your father, Gerald Morrison, was a good man who died believing a lie. Come inside and I will tell you the truth. The cafe was warm and smelled like coffee and fresh bread. A woman with mechanical arms that shone like silver brought them 2 cups without asking what they wanted. She smiled at Admiral Bradford like an old friend and looked at Kyle like she knew exactly what happened outside. Kyle felt ashamed under her gaze, but he said nothing. The Admiral wrapped his weathered hands around the hot cup and stared into the dark liquid. Let me tell you what really happened on Earth, officer. Your father told you that the old world fell apart because people got positions they did not earn. That is not the truth. The truth is much more complicated and much more painful. Kyle listened without speaking. His coffee sat untouched on the table between them. The Admiral's voice was hypnotic in the quiet cafe. Outside, the city continued its evening routine, but inside, this small space-time seemed to slow down. Earth almost destroyed itself fighting over resources and power and ancient grudges that should have died centuries ago. The Admiral spoke each word carefully like he was handling something fragile. People used the color of skin as just another excuse to divide and conquer. Just another way to create an us versus them mentality. When the Kryn came and we discovered we were not alone in the universe, we had a choice. We could keep fighting each other or we could stand together as one species. Some people made the right choice. Some people finally understood that our differences were tiny compared to the gulf between us and alien species. But some people refused to change. They clung to their hatred even as alien ships burned our cities. They refused to work alongside people they considered inferior. And those people died, not because of their beliefs, but because they could not adapt to the reality of the universe. Kyle shifted in his seat. This was not the story his father told him. His father said Earth fell because weak leaders gave in to pressure from minority groups. His father said the military became less effective when it focused on diversity instead of merit. His father said good soldiers died because incompetent officers got promoted for the wrong reasons. I can see you struggling with this. The Admiral looked directly into Kyle's eyes. You have been taught one version of history, and now I am telling you something completely different. That is difficult to accept. But answer me this question. Do you think I earned my position? Do you think I became an admiral because of the color of my skin or because of my actions? Kyle opened his mouth and then closed it again. He wanted to say something cutting and cruel. He wanted to defend his father's memory and his own beliefs. But looking at the old man across from him with his wall of medals and his 4 decades of service and his calm, steady gaze, Kyle could not make himself say the words. I earned every single medal on that wall. Bradford's voice turned hard as steel. I bled for them. I watched friends die for them. I made decisions that still wake me up at night screaming. Not once did my skin color protect me from the consequences of my choices or the dangers I faced. If anything, it made my journey harder. I had to be twice as good to get half the recognition. That was the reality of Earth before the wars. That was what I overcame. Kyle felt tears burning behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. My father died in the colony wars. He was with the 42nd Frontier Regiment at Kepler Station. He told my mother before he died that bad intelligence from a black officer caused the ambush. He said that officer did not care about human lives. He said that officer was promoted because of politics, not skill. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. His face showed pain and something that might have been recognition. What was your father's full name? Gerald Morrison. He was a sergeant. He died holding the line while civilians evacuated. I knew the 42nd Regiment. Bradford pulled out a small electronic pad from his pocket. His fingers moved across the screen with surprising speed. They were hit hard at Kepler Station. Your father was right that there was an ambush, but everything else he believed was wrong. It was not bad intelligence, officer. It was a Kryn trick. They captured one of our ships and used it to get close to the station. We had no way of knowing until they opened fire. He turned the pad around so Kyle could see the screen. The officer who commanded that defense was named Henry Jackson. He was black, yes, but he also saved 15,000 civilian lives that day. He held the docking bay while transport ships evacuated everyone they could carry. The Kryn were less than 50 meters away when the last ship cleared the station. Commander Jackson could have escaped. He could have saved himself, but he stayed and fought to give others time to run. Kyle stared at the official report on the screen. The words swam in his vision. He tried to make sense of what he was reading, but his brain refused to process it properly. This could not be true. His father would not lie to him. His father believed what he said. But if his father was wrong, then everything Kyle built his life on was built on sand. Look at the evacuation list. The Admiral scrolled down the screen. Read the names of the people who escaped because Commander Jackson sacrificed himself. Kyle read the names slowly. His breath caught in his throat when he found the one he was looking for. Transport 7 passenger manifest, Morrison, Elizabeth. His mother. The woman who raised him after his father died. The woman who told him stories about his father's bravery and sacrifice. She was on that list. She lived because Commander Jackson stayed behind. Does your mother know this? The Admiral asked gently. Kyle shook his head. I do not think so. After my father died, she never talked about the details. She only said he died a hero and that we should honor his memory by being strong. I got all my information from my father's letters and recordings. He sent them home before the attack. He was convinced the black officers in command were incompetent and dangerous. Your father was wrong. Bradford said it kindly but firmly. He died believing a lie because grief and prejudice made him look for someone to blame. Commander Jackson became that target because his skin was dark. But the truth is Jackson saved your mother's life and thousands of others. He is a hero. Your father is also a hero for holding the line. But Jackson is not the villain your father made him out to be. Kyle put his head in his hands. 20 years of hatred and anger and prejudice came crashing down around him. 20 years of believing he knew the truth about the world. 20 years of seeing enemies where there were only people trying to survive. They sat in silence for several minutes. The woman with mechanical arms brought them fresh coffee and a plate of warm bread. She touched the Admiral's shoulder gently before walking away. Kyle wondered how many people this old man had helped over the years. How many lives he had touched with kindness and wisdom. I could destroy you, officer. The Admiral spoke softly, but his words hit Kyle like physical blows. That video from tonight is already spreading across the network. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this colony will know your face and your name. They will know you pulled a knife on an unarmed elderly man for no reason except prejudice. Your career is effectively over. Your reputation is ruined, and you deserve every bit of that consequence." Kyle nodded slowly. He accepted this fate. He deserved punishment for what he did. More than that, he deserved punishment for years of harassment and profiling and making people feel unsafe in their own neighborhoods. The weight of his actions pressed down on him like a mountain. But I am not going to do that. The Admiral continued, and Kyle's head snapped up in shock. "What do you mean, sir?" Kyle's voice came out as a confused whisper. "I mean, I am going to give you a choice." Bradford leaned forward, and his dark eyes burned with intensity. "You can resign tomorrow. You can disappear into whatever life waits for people who throw away their careers through bigotry and hatred. You can let shame eat you alive until there is nothing left but bitterness. That is one path. Or you can choose to learn. You can choose to change. You can become the kind of officer this colony actually needs instead of the kind it suffers under now." Kyle felt confused and suspicious. "Why would you give me that opportunity? Why would you let me keep my badge after what I did to you? After what I have probably done to dozens of other people who looked like you? That makes no sense, because someone gave me a chance once." The Admiral's voice softened with memory. "When I was a young officer fresh from the academy, I made a terrible mistake. We were on patrol near the frontier and I misread sensor data. I thought I saw enemy ships where there were only civilian transports. I gave the order to fire. 3 ships were destroyed before I realized my error. 200 innocent people died because of my arrogance and my inexperience." Kyle stared in disbelief. "You killed civilians, yes." Bradford did not look away or make excuses. "I killed 200 people through incompetence. My commanding officer could have ended my career with a single report. She could have sent me to prison for criminal negligence. She had every right and every reason to destroy me, but she did not. Instead, she sat me down much like I am sitting you down now. She taught me about responsibility and consequences and the weight of command. She showed me that failure is not the end unless you choose to let it be the end." "Who was she?" Kyle asked. "Captain Margaret Sullivan, white woman from Boston. She came from old military family where everyone expected her to be perfect. She had every reason to throw away a black kid from the rough side of Atlanta who just made the worst mistake of his life. But she did not see a black ensign who screwed up. She saw a human being who needed guidance. She saw potential worth saving. She spent 2 years mentoring me and teaching me and making sure I understood the value of every single human life under my command." The Admiral's eyes grew distant. "She died at Tau Ceti, took a plasma bolt meant for me. Her last words were to tell me to take command and finish the fight. I carry her memory with me every day. Every decision I made for the rest of my career was influenced by her wisdom and her mercy. She is the reason I became an admiral. She is the reason thousands of people are alive today, and she would want me to give you the same chance she gave me." Kyle felt tears rolling down his face now. He did not try to stop them. "I do not deserve that kind of mercy. I have spent years hurting people. Years making them feel afraid and unwelcome. Years upholding a system that judges people by their appearance instead of their character. I deserve to lose everything, perhaps you do." The Admiral agreed. "But here is what I learned in 47 years of service. Humanity is not about what we deserve. It is about what we choose to do with the chances we are given. You have a choice right now, officer. You can accept that you are irredeemable and give up. Or you can accept that you have been wrong and work to become better. The first choice is easy. The second choice is hard, but only the second choice leads anywhere worth going." "What would I have to do?" Kyle asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning you will report to the Veterans Center." Bradford's voice took on the tone of command again. "You will volunteer there every single day off you have for the next year. You will listen to stories from people who fought and bled for humanity. People of every color and background and belief system. You will clean floors and serve food and help old soldiers with their medications. You will see them as people, not as categories or statistics or threats, and if I refuse..." Kyle had to ask even though he already knew he would not refuse. "Then I make a phone call and by noon tomorrow you are unemployed and unemployable. The video goes viral. Your face becomes the symbol of everything wrong with colonial law enforcement. You spend the rest of your life as a cautionary tale that parents use to teach their children about the dangers of hatred. But I do not think you will refuse, Officer Morrison. I saw something in your eyes tonight when you learned about Commander Jackson. I saw doubt. I saw the beginning of understanding. Doubt is good. It means you can still grow. Kyle wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I will do it. I will report to the Veterans Center tomorrow morning. I will listen and learn and try to become better. I do not know if I can change completely. My father's voice is still loud in my head. But I want to try, that is all anyone can ask. The Admiral stood up slowly and his old joints made soft popping sounds. Change is not an event, officer. It is a process. It will be hard and uncomfortable and sometimes painful. You will want to quit. You will want to go back to your old beliefs because they are comfortable and familiar. But if you push through that discomfort, you will find something better on the other side. They walked out of the cafe together. The night air was cool and clean after the rain. Kyle looked up at the dome above them and the stars beyond. Those stars seemed different now. Less distant, less cold. They were full of humans of every type working together to survive in a hostile universe. 3 months passed like water flowing over stones. Kyle showed up at the Veterans Center every morning he had off from his police duties. At first he went because he was afraid of what would happen if he did not. The threat of the video being released hung over him like a sword on a thin thread. But as weeks turned into months, something inside him began to shift. The old soldiers at the center saw through him immediately. They recognized his discomfort and his lingering prejudices. They did not coddle him or make it easy. They challenged him with every story and every interaction. They forced him to see what he had been blind to for his entire life. On his first day, Kyle met a man named Danny Lopez. He was a short Hispanic man with burn scars covering the left side of his face. Danny had been a Marine during the colony wars. He told Kyle about holding a mining colony against Kryn ground forces for 6 days with only 30 soldiers. 15 of those soldiers were black or brown. 8 were Asian, 4 were white. 3 did not survive to see rescue arrive. The color of their skin did not matter when the Kryn came through the walls. Danny's voice was rough and his eyes were hard. All that mattered was, could you shoot straight, and would you cover your brother's back? The black kid from Detroit saved my life twice. The Asian girl from Singapore held the left flank when everyone else was falling back. The white boy from Texas died throwing a grenade to buy us time. Tell me, officer, which one of them did not earn their place? Kyle had no answer for that. He cleaned floors and served meals and listened to more stories. Each story chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart. Each story showed him a different version of humanity than the one his father described. In his second month, Kyle met a woman named Grace Kimura. She was a Japanese pilot who flew transport ships during the evacuation of New Tokyo. She was 75 years old and walked with a cane, but her mind was sharp as broken glass. She told Kyle about flying through enemy fire to rescue civilians trapped in a burning city. Her co-pilot was a black man from Jamaica. Her navigator was a white woman from Canada. Her engineer was an Indian man from Mumbai. We saved 4,000 people that day. Grace's hand shook as she remembered. My co-pilot died when shrapnel came through the cockpit. He used his body to shield me from the blast. His last words were to tell me to keep flying. He was 26 years old. He had a wife and a baby daughter back on Earth. He gave his life so I could save strangers he would never meet. Do you think he cared about their race when he made that choice? Kyle started staying longer at the center. He began arriving early and leaving late. The old soldiers noticed the change in him. They saw how he listened more carefully now, how he asked questions that showed real curiosity instead of defensive hostility. They began to trust him with more responsibilities. They let him help with therapy sessions and support groups. That was when Kyle met Samuel Green. He was an old white man with kind eyes and hands that trembled from nerve damage. Samuel had served in the fleet for 30 years. He was from Alabama and his accent was thick as honey. When he spoke, Kyle heard echoes of his own father's voice. But the words Samuel said were nothing like what Kyle's father taught him. I grew up in a house where hate was taught before love. Samuel sat in a worn chair and sipped coffee from a chipped mug. My daddy was in the old clan back when that still meant something on Earth. He taught me that people with dark skin were not really people at all. He taught me that whites were superior and everyone else was less. And I believed every word he said because he was my father, and fathers do not lie to their sons. Kyle felt his chest tighten. This was too familiar. This was his own story being told by someone else's mouth. Then the war came, and I was 17 and stupid and full of poison. Samuel's voice grew soft with old pain. I got assigned to a mixed unit. Black soldiers and Asian soldiers and Hispanic soldiers all working together. I hated every single one of them. I refused to eat with them or talk to them or acknowledge they were human. I spent 6 months making everyone's life miserable with my attitude. What changed? Kyle asked quietly. A black sergeant named Bobby Washington threw himself on a plasma grenade to save our squad. Samuel's hands shook harder and coffee slopped over the rim of his mug. We were pinned down in a canyon. The Kryn had us surrounded. They dropped a grenade right in the middle of our position. Bobby was 5 feet away. He could have run. He could have dived for cover. Instead, he jumped on top of that grenade and wrapped his body around it. Samuel paused and wiped his eyes. The explosion killed him instantly. There was not enough left to send home to his family. But he saved 7 lives, including mine. I remember lying there with his blood still warm on my uniform, thinking about all the things my daddy taught me. All the hate and the fear and the lies. And I realized that a man who would die for me was more of a brother than anyone I shared blood with. Kyle felt tears on his face, but he did not wipe them away. He sat frozen in his chair listening to this old man describe the exact journey Kyle was on right now. The same prejudice, the same awakening, the same painful process of unlearning everything he thought he knew. That was 40 years ago. Samuel looked at Kyle with eyes that understood everything. I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of Bobby's sacrifice. Trying to teach people what I learned too late. That hate is easy, but it is poison. It kills the hater first and then spreads to everyone around them. Love is harder. Understanding is harder. But they are the only things worth fighting for. How do you live with it? Kyle's voice broke. How do you live knowing you wasted so much time hating someone who would die for you? How do you forgive yourself for being so wrong? You do not forgive yourself, Samuel said simply. You carry it. You let it hurt. You use that pain to make sure you never go back to who you were, and you work every day to be better than you were yesterday. That is all you can do. That is all any of us can do. Kyle put his head in his hands and sobbed. All the years of hatred and anger and fear came pouring out of him. The old soldiers in the center gathered around him. They did not offer empty comfort or easy forgiveness. They just sat with him in his pain and let him feel the full weight of what he had been and what he was trying to become. Admiral Bradford watched from the doorway. He had been checking on Kyle's progress regularly, without making his presence obvious. What he saw now satisfied him deeply. This was not the same man who pulled a knife on him 3 months ago. This was someone being broken down and rebuilt into something better. It was painful to watch but necessary. Growth always hurt. 6 months into his volunteer work, Kyle noticed something strange happening. He was changing in ways he did not expect. When he patrolled the streets now, he saw people differently. The automatic suspicion that used to fill his mind when he saw someone with dark skin was fading. It was being replaced by something harder to define. Curiosity, maybe. Or just basic human decency. Other officers noticed the change, too. Some of them mocked him for going soft. They said he was being brainwashed by liberal propaganda. They said real cops did not waste time worrying about feelings and fairness. Kyle listened to their words and recognized his own voice from 6 months ago. It made him feel sick. He started speaking up in briefings when other officers made racist jokes or used slurs. At first they laughed at him. Then they grew angry. Then they started avoiding him. Kyle found himself isolated from the people who used to be his friends. But he also found himself sleeping better at night. The veterans at the center became his real friends. They invited him to dinners and game nights. They introduced him to their families. Kyle met children and grandchildren of every race and background. He saw how these families lived and loved and struggled just like his own family did. The differences he used to focus on became smaller. The similarities he used to ignore became larger. One evening, Kyle was helping Samuel Green organize old military photos when he found something that stopped him cold. It was a picture of Samuel's old unit. 30 soldiers standing in front of a transport ship. Half of them were not white. They had their arms around each other and they were smiling. Samuel stood in the middle with a black man on his right and an Asian woman on his left. That is Bobby. Samuel pointed to the black man. He was the best friend I ever had. We served together for 2 years before he died. He taught me how to really see people instead of just looking at their skin. He never held my past against me even though he had every right to hate me for the things I said and did. Kyle stared at the photo. These people looked happy together. They looked like family. It was so different from the hostile separation his father described. His father made it sound like integration was forced and unnatural. But this picture showed something organic and real. How did Bobby forgive you? Kyle asked. After everything you believed and said, how did he give you a chance? He said everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were. Samuel's voice was soft with memory. He said holding on to hate takes more energy than letting it go. He said the Kryn did not care about our petty human prejudices, so we should not waste time caring about them either. He was right. Out there in space fighting aliens who wanted us dead. All those old Earth divisions seemed stupid and small. Kyle thought about that for a long time. He thought about the aliens that still threatened human colonies. The Kryn were defeated, but they were not extinct. Other hostile species existed in the galaxy. Humans needed to stand together against those threats. Fighting each other over skin color was not just wrong. It was suicidal. A few weeks later, Kyle stopped a young black man on the street for a broken tail light. It was a routine stop. But as Kyle approached the vehicle, he noticed his own reactions. His hand did not go to his weapon. His voice did not turn hard and suspicious. He just walked up and spoke like a normal person to another normal person. The young man was nervous but not terrified. Kyle explained the problem with the light and gave him a warning instead of a ticket. They talked for a few minutes about the weather and the upcoming sports season. When Kyle walked back to his patrol car, he felt different. Lighter somehow. Like he had passed some kind of test he did not know he was taking. That night, Kyle called his mother for the first time in months. He had been avoiding her because he did not know how to explain what was happening to him. How do you tell your mother that everything your father taught you was wrong? How do you say that the man she loved and mourned was a good person who believed terrible things? Mom, I need to tell you something about Dad. Kyle's voice shook as he spoke. About the way he died and who really saved your life that day. His mother listened quietly as Kyle told her about Commander Jackson. About the sacrifice and the evacuation and the truth behind the lies. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I always suspected something was wrong with your father's version of events. His mother's voice was tired but not surprised. He was a good man in many ways, but he carried poison from his own father. I tried to counter it when you were young, but after he died, I did not have the strength to fight his memory. I am sorry, Kyle. I should have been stronger for you. It is not your fault, Mom. Kyle felt tears burning behind his eyes again. We both believed what we were taught. But I am learning now. I am trying to be better. That is all anyone can ask. His mother said softly. Your father would be proud of you for having the courage to change. He was wrong about many things, but he was not a bad man, just a scared and angry one. You are choosing not to be scared and angry. That takes real strength. After the call ended, Kyle sat in his small apartment and thought about his journey. 6 months ago, he pulled a knife on an innocent man because of prejudice and fear. Now he was volunteering at a veterans center and learning to see people as people. The change felt huge but also fragile. He worried he might slip back into old patterns if he was not careful. That worry led him to make a decision. He started documenting everything he was learning. He wrote down the stories the veterans told him. He recorded conversations and took notes. He began putting together a training program that he could share with other officers. If he was going to change, then maybe he could help others change too. Admiral Bradford heard about this project through Samuel Green. The old admiral showed up at the Veterans Center one evening and asked to see what Kyle was working on. Kyle nervously showed him the materials, the manual on recognizing bias, the video interviews with veterans, the exercises designed to challenge assumptions. This is good work, officer. Bradford flipped through the pages with careful attention. This is exactly what law enforcement needs. Have you thought about making this official? About proposing it to your department as mandatory training? Kyle laughed bitterly. They would never accept it. Half the force thinks I have gone crazy. The other half avoids me completely. No one wants to hear about bias training from the guy who pulled a knife on you. What if you had support from someone they could not ignore? Bradford's eyes twinkled with something that might have been mischief. What if a decorated admiral vouched for your program and helped you present it to the colonial government? Do you think they would listen then? 3 weeks later, Kyle stood in front of the Colonial Council wearing his dress uniform. His hands trembled slightly as he held his presentation materials. Admiral Bradford sat in the front row with several other retired military officers. They had all agreed to support Kyle's training program. The council chamber was full of people. News had spread about the young cop who pulled a knife on a war hero and then spent 6 months learning why he was wrong. Some people came hoping to see him humiliated. Others came hoping to see genuine change. Kyle could feel all their eyes on him. The council chairwoman was a stern-looking woman named Patricia Holmes. She had gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She gestured for Kyle to begin his presentation. Kyle took a deep breath and started talking. 6 months ago, I made a terrible mistake. Kyle's voice was steady despite his nerves. I let prejudice and fear guide my actions. I pulled a weapon on an innocent man because of the color of his skin. I was wrong. More than that, I was dangerous. I represented everything that is broken about how we police our communities. He paused and looked around the room. But Admiral Bradford gave me something I did not deserve. He gave me a chance to learn, to change, to understand why my beliefs were not just morally wrong but practically stupid. We are humans living among alien species that see us as one group. Fighting each other over skin color is not just evil. It is suicidal. Kyle clicked to his first slide showing statistics. Every year, our police department receives complaints about racial profiling. Every year, those complaints are dismissed or ignored. Every year, the problem gets worse. We are losing the trust of the very communities we are supposed to protect. That makes us less effective and less safe. He showed videos of veterans telling their stories. Danny Lopez describing his diverse Marine unit. Grace Kimura talking about her multi-ethnic crew. Samuel Green explaining how a black man's sacrifice changed his life. The room was silent as these old soldiers spoke. These people fought for our survival. Kyle continued. They did not have the luxury of prejudice. They had to see each other as human or die. We are not at war right now, but we still need that same mindset. We need to see the people we serve as humans first and everything else second. He outlined his training program. Mandatory sessions for all officers. Regular community engagement. Partnerships with the Veterans Center. Bias recognition exercises. Accountability measures. It was comprehensive and it was challenging. Kyle knew many officers would resist it. This will not be easy. Kyle finished his presentation. It will be uncomfortable and some people will hate it, but it is necessary. If we want to be better, we have to do better. And I am proof that change is possible. 6 months ago, I was a racist cop who pulled a knife on an elderly black man. Today, I am standing here asking you to help me make sure no one else makes the same mistakes I did. The room erupted in debate. Some council members praised Kyle's honesty and courage. Others questioned whether someone with his history should be designing training programs. The argument went back and forth for 30 minutes. Then Admiral Bradford stood up and the room fell silent. I have known this young man for 6 months now. Bradford's voice carried authority that made people listen. I watched him go from someone full of hate to someone full of purpose. That transformation was not easy. It was painful and difficult, and he wanted to quit many times. But he kept going because he genuinely wanted to be better. The Admiral looked around the chamber. We cannot change the past. Officer Morrison will always carry the weight of what he did. But we can change the future. This training program could prevent others from making his mistakes. It could save lives and rebuild trust and make this colony safer for everyone. I urge you to approve it. The vote was close, but it passed. Kyle's training program would become mandatory for all colonial law enforcement. He would oversee its implementation with support from the Veterans Center and several retired military advisors. It was more responsibility than Kyle ever expected to have. It was also a chance to turn his biggest failure into something meaningful. After the vote, Kyle found Admiral Bradford in the hallway outside the chamber. Thank you, sir. Kyle struggled to find adequate words. For everything. For not destroying me when you could have. For teaching me instead of punishing me. For believing I could change when I did not believe it myself. Bradford smiled and put a hand on Kyle's shoulder. The work is just beginning, officer. Getting the program approved was the easy part. Now you have to implement it. You will face resistance from other cops who think like you used to think. You will face criticism from people who believe you have not changed enough. You will face exhaustion and frustration and moments where you want to give up. I know. Kyle nodded. But I have help now. The veterans at the center, officers who actually want to do better. People in the community who are willing to give me a chance. And I have your example. If you can carry the weight of 200 civilian deaths and still serve with honor, then I can carry the weight of my own failures. The Admiral's eyes grew distant for a moment. Captain Sullivan told me something when I was struggling with my guilt. She said the dead do not need our grief. They need our dedication. They need us to be worthy of their sacrifice. Your father and all the people who died at Kepler Station. They need you to be worthy of their memory by building a better world than the one they left behind. Kyle understood. His father died believing lies, but he still died trying to protect others. The least Kyle could do was make sure other young officers did not grow up with the same poisonous beliefs. The least he could do was honor his father's courage while rejecting his father's prejudice. Over the next few months, Kyle threw himself into his new role. He designed training modules and led discussion groups. He brought veterans into police stations to share their stories. He created partnerships between law enforcement and community organizations. It was exhausting work. It was also the most meaningful thing Kyle had ever done. Some officers embraced the training. They admitted their own biases and worked to overcome them. Others resisted furiously. They accused Kyle of being a traitor and a coward. A few tried to get him fired, but the program had Admiral Bradford's backing and the council's approval. It moved forward despite the opposition. The real test came when one of Kyle's fellow officers was caught on video using excessive force against a young Hispanic man. The video showed clear racial bias in how the officer spoke and acted. It was exactly the kind of situation Kyle's training was designed to prevent. The whole colony watched to see how the department would respond. Kyle spoke at the disciplinary hearing. He described recognizing his own past behavior and what the officer did. He explained how bias operates beneath conscious awareness. He argued for mandatory additional training instead of immediate termination. He believed in second chances because he received one himself. The hearing board agreed with Kyle's recommendation. The officer would undergo intensive retraining and be suspended without pay for 3 months. If he showed genuine improvement, he could return to duty. If not, he would be terminated. It was a fair compromise that showed the system could both hold people accountable and offer paths to redemption. 1 year after the knife incident, Kyle walked into Admiral Bradford's small apartment carrying a bottle of wine and a datapad. The old admiral was sitting by his window looking out at the stars beyond the colony dome. He turned when Kyle entered and smiled. The anniversary already? Bradford gestured to a chair. Time moves faster when you are old. It feels like yesterday you were pointing a knife at me with hate in your eyes. Kyle sat down and poured 2 glasses of wine. I wanted to show you something. He handed the datapad to Bradford. The admiral put on his reading glasses and scrolled through the information on the screen. His expression changed from curiosity to surprise to something that might have been pride. Complaints about racial profiling are down 60%. Bradford read the statistics carefully. Use of force incidents involving minority civilians down 45%. Community trust ratings up 30%. Officer recruitment from diverse backgrounds up 70%. This is remarkable work, Kyle. It is not just me, sir, Kyle said quickly. The veterans at the center. The community leaders who agreed to partner with us. The officers who were brave enough to examine their own biases. This was a team effort. I just helped organize it. Bradford set down the datapad and looked at Kyle with those penetrating dark eyes. Do not diminish your role. You could have resigned a year ago. You could have taken the easy path and disappeared. Instead, you chose the hard path. You chose to face what you were and work to become something better. That takes real courage. Kyle felt his throat tighten with emotion. I wanted to tell you that the video from that night. I know you said you deleted it months ago, but I want you to know that I am glad it happened. Not glad I did what I did, but glad you were there to stop me and teach me. If you had been anyone else, I probably would have kept being who I was until I hurt someone badly. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. I did not actually delete that video, Kyle. Kyle's head snapped up. What? I lied to you about deleting it. Bradford's voice was calm. I kept it as insurance in case you reverted to your old ways. In case you were just pretending to change to save your job. I wanted to make sure you were genuine before I truly let go of that evidence. Kyle felt a flash of anger and then something else. Understanding, maybe. You did not trust me, not at first. Bradford admitted. Trust must be earned, Kyle. Especially when someone has proven themselves untrustworthy. But you have earned it now. You have shown through consistent action over 12 months that your change is real. So I want you to have this. The Admiral pulled out a small storage chip and handed it to Kyle. That is the only copy of the video. Do with it what you think is right. Keep it as a reminder. Destroy it to move forward. The choice is yours now. Kyle held the chip in his palm. It was so small, but it represented the worst moment of his life. Part of him wanted to crush it immediately. Part of him wanted to keep it forever as penance. He thought about what Samuel Green told him. You do not forgive yourself. You carry it. You let it hurt. I am going to keep it, Kyle said finally. But not as punishment. As a reminder of where I came from and how far I have traveled. As a tool to show other officers that change is possible if you are willing to do the work. Bradford nodded approvingly. That is wisdom. The past cannot be erased, but it can be used. Captain Sullivan used to say that mistakes are only wasted if we fail to learn from them. You have learned. More than that, you are teaching others. They sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, drinking wine and watching the stars. Kyle thought about everything that happened in the past year. The pain and growth and revelation, the hard conversations and harder realizations, the slow process of becoming someone different than who he was raised to be. Can I ask you something personal, sir? Kyle broke the silence. Of course, do you still think about the civilians you killed, the 200 people who died because of your mistake? Does that guilt ever go away? Bradford was quiet for a long time. No, it never goes away. I think about them every single day. I see their faces in my dreams. I know their names and their ages and where they were from. The guilt is permanent, Kyle. But it has become something else over the years. It has become motivation. Every life I saved after that. Every good decision I made. Every time I showed mercy instead of judgment. Those were all for them. For the people I failed. So we just carry it forever, Kyle asked. We carry it and we transform it. Bradford turned to look at Kyle directly. Your guilt about who you were, that can either destroy you or drive you. The choice is yours every single day. Some days you will want to give up. Some days the weight will feel unbearable. But if you keep going, if you keep working to be better, that guilt becomes purpose. It becomes the fuel that powers your commitment to justice. Kyle understood. He would always be the cop who pulled a knife on an innocent man. That would never change. But he could also be the cop who learned from that mistake and spent the rest of his life making sure others did not repeat it. Both things could be true at the same time. There is something else I wanted to tell you. Bradford pulled out another data pad. A position opened up at Fleet Command, Director of Law Enforcement Training for all Colonial Police Forces. It is a 3-year appointment with option to extend. They want someone who understands both the military and civilian side, someone who has actually changed hearts and minds. They asked me to recommend someone, and I recommended you. Kyle felt his mouth go dry. That is a huge responsibility, sir. I am only 32 years old. There are people with much more experience. Experience is not the same as understanding. Bradford smiled. You understand what needs to change because you have lived through that change. You know the resistance you will face because you were that resistance. You can speak to other officers in language they will hear because you used to be one of them. This is your calling, Kyle, if you choose to accept it. Kyle thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Yes, I accept. When do I start? The Admiral laughed. That is the Kyle Morrison I have come to know. Once you commit, you do not hesitate. You start in 2 months. That gives you time to finish your current projects and train your replacement here. They talked for hours that night. About the future and the past. About the work still needed. About the progress already made. When Kyle finally left to go home, the stars above the dome seemed brighter than usual. Or maybe he was just seeing them more clearly now. 2 months later, Kyle stood in his new office at Colonial Fleet Command. The walls were bare except for one thing. A framed photo of Admiral Bradford standing with his diverse crew at Tau Ceti. Below it, Kyle had mounted a small card with a quote from Captain Sullivan. The dead do not need our grief. They need our dedication. Kyle would carry the weight of his past every day. But he would use that weight to build something better. He would teach other officers what the veterans taught him. That humanity works best when it sees itself as one species. That prejudice is not just morally wrong, but practically stupid in a universe full of actual enemies. That the measure of a person is not where they start, but where they choose to go. And every time Kyle trained a new group of officers, he would tell them his story. About the night he pulled a knife on an elderly black man. About the Admiral who chose mercy over justice, about the year of hard work and painful growth that followed. Some officers would dismiss him, but some would listen. And those who listened would change. And those who changed would teach others. And slowly the poison would be drawn out of the system, one person at a time. It was not fast and it was not easy, but it was happening. Humanity was learning to be better, one difficult choice at a time.